The chandeliers sparkled like stars above a crowd dressed in glitter and ego. It was the biggest charity gala of the year, the kind of event where everyone smiled too hard and clapped too fast, hoping someone important was watching. The air buzzed with celebrity chatter, champagne flutes clinked like fragile trophies, and in the center of it all stood the night's master of ceremony, a famous TV host known more for controversy than compassion. She was radiant, ruthless, and ready to make headlines. But no one expected who would become her target. Senator John Kennedy walked in alone. No entourage, no flashing cameras. Just a quiet, respectful presence in a simple black suit. He moved through the ballroom unnoticed at first, pausing to greet the waitstaff before finding his table near the back, exactly where someone like him preferred to be. But that night, the spotlight had other plans. The host took the stage, microphone in hand, her smile sharp as glass. After a few canned jokes and polite applause, she scanned the room, eyes locking on to the senator, and then she went in. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, pausing for dramatic effect, "I thought I heard a banjo backstage, but turns out it was just Senator Kennedy clearing his throat." The room laughed, awkwardly at first, then louder. She pushed further. "I mean, bless his heart, he's still dressing like it's 1962. Somebody tell him the Civil War's over and we won." The laughter turned sharper, more cruel, and the camera flashes doubled. But Kennedy? He just smiled. Not the tight, forced grin of a man trying to hide his rage, but the soft, steady smile of someone who had seen this game played before. He raised his glass in her direction, nodded once, and said nothing. What no one in that glitter-drenched ballroom realized was that a young server at the back, barely 21 and working her first gala shift, had been live-streaming the entire thing on TikTok. Not for clout, not even intentionally. For fun, to show her friends what rich people were like. But when the host turned her venom on Kennedy, something in the girl's gut twisted. She kept the camera rolling, zoomed in, and captioned the video. Mocking a U.S. senator for how he talks in 2024? The internet caught fire. Within minutes, the clip had thousands of comments. By the time dessert was served, it had millions. People weren't just angry, they were stunned. Not just at the insult, but at the way Kennedy had responded. With grace, with restraint, with something they hadn't seen in a long time. Dignity. Someone commented, "That's what leadership looks like." Another wrote, "He just shut her down without saying a word." And somewhere deep in that thread, a comment began to trend. "This is a 9. If you feel that in your soul, drop a 9 below." So now I'll ask you, would you have laughed with the crowd? Or would you have stood with the man who didn't need a microphone to speak volumes? If you believe silence can be stronger than shouting, if you believe there's power in stillness, hit that like button and comment 9 right now. Because what happens next will shake the room even harder. The host thought she had won the moment, but the moment had already turned on her. And the internet? The internet never forgets. By the time the final toast echoed through the ballroom, the world outside had already started to turn. While guests laughed over crème brûlée and posed for filtered selfies, millions of viewers were watching a very different story unfold on their phones. The clip of the TV host mocking Senator John Kennedy was everywhere. On TikTok, Instagram Reels, Twitter feeds, even reposted to Facebook by furious aunts who hadn't shared anything since 2016. And it wasn't just the clip. People were cutting it, remixing it, zooming in on Kennedy's calm expression as he raised his glass. They slowed it down, added subtitles, put dramatic music under it. It wasn't just a moment, it was a movement. Inside the venue, the host still basked in the afterglow of the crowd's laughter, unaware of the firestorm brewing beyond the velvet curtains. She took selfies with fans, clinked glasses with sponsors, and whispered smugly to a fellow presenter, "He just sat there like a bump on a log. Poor guy probably didn't even get the joke." But in the kitchen, the server who'd posted the original clip stood frozen behind a stack of plates, watching her phone. The number of viewers was climbing so fast it made her dizzy. She turned to a fellow staff member, eyes wide, and whispered, "I think this is going viral. Like, really viral." By midnight, the hashtags had started to trend. What mocked but graceful, art Kennedy silence. Dignity speaks louder. Celebrities began weighing in. One actor tweeted, "That wasn't a joke. That was a public mugging." A popular singer posted, "Southern doesn't mean stupid. That man showed more class in 10 seconds than most people show in a lifetime." The comments were rolling in like thunder. Then came the second blow. A former assistant to the TV host, someone who had remained silent for years, posted a 3-minute video. Her voice was trembling but steady as she spoke. "She's been like this for years," she said. "She mocks everyone behind closed doors, interns, guests, even fans. She told us once, 'Always have a target. Laughter needs a victim.'" That video hit like a wrecking ball. In less than an hour, news outlets picked it up. Screenshots of old tweets, past interviews, and out-of-context comments from the host began resurfacing. It wasn't long before "pattern of behavior" started trending right next to her name. Back at the gala, the host was still glowing under the lights, still laughing as she gave her final remarks. She had no idea her Instagram was losing thousands of followers by the minute. She didn't see the email waiting in her inbox from one of her biggest sponsors, asking for urgent clarification. And she didn't know that in one corner of the ballroom, a young woman, Sarah, the same server who posted the video, was receiving messages from journalists asking for interviews. But John Kennedy? He knew. He could feel it. The mood had shifted. The laughs were quieter. The eyes watching him had changed. No longer amused, now curious, now ashamed. A few people even approached him awkwardly to say hello or offer a stammered compliment about his composure. Kennedy accepted each with the same calm presence he had held all evening. But inside, he wasn't thinking about himself. He was thinking about the culture, about what it meant when cruelty got a standing ovation and dignity had to go viral to be seen. That night, back at his hotel, he sat on the edge of the bed, still in his black suit, and opened his phone. The server had sent him the clip. He watched it once. Then again. Then he read the comments. Not the trending ones, the quiet ones. From people who'd been mocked. From teenagers who'd been bullied. From veterans who said they were tired of being laughed at for how they talked or looked. He didn't feel vindicated. He felt something deeper, something heavier. Responsibility. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about every person who had been humiliated in public, every underdog who stayed silent because they thought it was safer. And now that the spotlight was here, he knew exactly what to do with it. But before anything else, he turned back to the clip and watched himself raise the glass. That moment before the world exploded. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't a comeback. It was just grace. And grace, he realized, might be the loudest sound in a world full of noise. The morning after the gala, headlines exploded like fireworks across every screen in America. "TV host mocks senator, internet responds with fury," read one. Another declared, "John Kennedy's silent toast echoes louder than any roast." But the most shared posts weren't from news outlets. They came from ordinary people. A high school teacher wrote, "Showed the clip in class today. We talked about dignity. Half my students cried." A mother of 2 commented, "My son stutters." He watched Kennedy smile through that and said, "Mom, I want to be like him." The story wasn't just news. It was personal. Meanwhile, the host's publicist was in crisis mode. Phone lines rang nonstop, emails pinged like warning sirens, and sponsors began releasing vague statements about re-evaluating partnerships. Still, the host, let's call her Madison Lane, refused to accept that the tide had turned. "It was a joke," she told her team. "That man's a politician. He's supposed to take punches." But this wasn't about politics. It wasn't even about her anymore. This was about something deeper, something raw. In the hours that followed, new layers began to unravel. A well-known talk show producer anonymously leaked emails from years back, in which Madison had written, "The Southern drawl always plays well for easy laughs. Kennedy's like a walking SNL sketch." Screenshots spread like wildfire. More former colleagues spoke out, one recalling how Madison once said, "Humiliating people is how you keep the audience awake." The internet wasn't angry anymore, it was disgusted. But while Madison spiraled in a storm of spin, Senator Kennedy remained silent. No tweet, no press release, no morning show appearances. Instead, he boarded a flight back to Louisiana, alone, sitting in coach by choice. A flight attendant recognized him but said nothing, until she slipped him a note on a napkin. "I saw the video. Thank you for showing us what real strength looks like." He folded it and placed it in his inside jacket pocket, close to the heart. That afternoon, Kennedy arrived at a local community center for a scheduled town hall, a humble, low-profile event planned weeks before. But word had spread. The room overflowed with residents, journalists, even young people who'd never attended anything political in their lives. Cameras flashed, but Kennedy didn't walk to the podium. He walked to the center of the room. No script, no teleprompter, just his voice. Steady, measured, warm. "I didn't come here to talk about what happened last night," he began, "but I see now, maybe we need to." The room quieted, leaning in. "I've been in public life for a long time. I've seen anger. I've seen unfairness. But what I saw in that ballroom wasn't about me. It was about what we've allowed ourselves to laugh at." A pause. Eyes locked. "If we're not careful, we'll forget the difference between funny and cruel." Then he did something no one expected. He held up his phone, playing the viral clip on full volume. The insult, the laughter, his silent smile. He let it play all the way through. When it ended, the room didn't clap. It held its breath. And then Kennedy said, "Grace doesn't always make noise. But it always leaves a mark." From the back of the room, a teenage girl raised her hand. "Why didn't you say anything back to her?" she asked. Kennedy smiled, not with smugness, but with softness. "Because I wasn't the one who needed to hear the truth. She was. And sometimes the loudest response is no response at all." That line, "the loudest response is no response," went viral again. By nightfall, it was on t-shirts, posters, and tattoo mock-ups. Influencers quoted it. Journalists analyzed it. College professors used it in lectures on ethics and character. And somewhere, sitting alone in a green room waiting for a network apology interview that would never air, Madison Lane watched in silence as her own face faded from relevance. Not from scandal, but from being completely eclipsed by a man who said nothing. And changed everything. The internet wasn't done yet. But neither was Kennedy. Because in the next 24 hours, he would finally break his silence. And when he did, it wouldn't be about revenge. It would be about redemption. And what he had to say would reach millions. The next day, as dawn broke over a nation still buzzing from the viral storm, Senator John Kennedy sat alone in his study. No camera crews, no advisors. Just silence, his morning coffee, and a blinking cursor on a blank screen. He'd refused all interview requests. He hadn't answered a single call from the media. But now, for the first time since the gala, he was ready to speak. Not with fury or defense, but with purpose. He opened a blank document and began to type, slowly, deliberately. No dramatic title, just a letter to the American people. Within the hour, the post went live on his official website and was shared across his social media platforms with one sentence. We live in a world loud with mockery, but quiet with meaning. Let's talk about that. In the letter, Kennedy wrote not about Madison Lane by name, but about the broader culture that had cheered while someone else was torn down. Mocking a man's voice isn't bravery, it's theater, and theater ends when the curtains close, but respect, that lingers. That shapes who we are. He didn't ask for an apology. He didn't demand accountability. Instead, he asked for reflection. What kind of world are we building when cruelty is considered charisma and silence is mistaken for weakness? That post struck a chord deeper than any headline ever could. By midday, it had been shared over 10 million times. Teachers printed it out and taped it to classroom walls. Veterans groups held discussion circles around it. A major morning show anchor read it live on air and broke into tears halfway through. And perhaps most remarkably, influencers, many known for their sharp wit and no-filter comedy, posted videos saying, "This made me stop and think." But while Kennedy's words rippled across the nation like a quiet anthem, Madison Lane's world was crumbling faster than she could spin the narrative. Her PR team released a public statement claiming the jokes were taken out of context and that Senator Kennedy and I share mutual respect. But the damage was done. The internet had receipts, the emails, the leaked footage, the string of past incidents coming back to light. Sponsors pulled out, networks distanced themselves. One of her oldest colleagues tweeted, "We all knew it. We just never thought she'd get caught." And then came the final blow. An exclusive exposé aired that evening, featuring interviews with former interns, crew members, and backstage workers. One particularly chilling clip showed an old behind-the-scenes moment. Madison, mid-laugh, saying into her mic, "You know what makes good television? Making someone squirm and look too polite to fight back." It was damning. Not just for what she said, but for how gleefully she said it. The public had already made up its mind, but this was confirmation. The clip ended with a still image of Kennedy's face from the gala, glass raised, eyes calm, and the words, "He didn't squirm." He stood still. The shift was complete. Overnight, Madison Lane went from A-list MC to public disgrace. Her face vanished from promo posters. Her bookings were canceled. Her name became shorthand for a cultural reckoning. And through it all, Kennedy never said a single harsh word against her. He didn't need to. The truth had done the speaking for him. That same evening, something unexpected happened. Sarah, the young server who had live-streamed the original moment, received a direct message from Kennedy's office. It wasn't for publicity. It wasn't even a thank you. It was an invitation. The next day, Sarah found herself sitting across from Senator Kennedy at a quiet cafe in Baton Rouge. No cameras, no staff, just a pot of tea and two people who'd witnessed a moment neither of them would ever forget. "I didn't do anything special," she said nervously. Kennedy smiled. "You pressed record when it mattered. That's not nothing." They talked for an hour, about online hate, about being invisible, about what it means to speak up when no one else does. Before leaving, Kennedy reached into his pocket and handed her a small silver pin. "What's this?" she asked. "It's the Louisiana State Magnolia," he said. "It's not loud, it's not flashy, but it blooms anyway, even when the world's not watching." And just like that, the story shifted once more. It wasn't just about a joke gone wrong. It wasn't just about power abused and dignity restored. It was about a generation realizing they don't have to be loud to be heard. They just have to be present. And the girl who pressed record? She became the voice of that quiet revolution. 2 days after their quiet meeting, Senator John Kennedy stood behind the curtain of a crowded auditorium in New Orleans. The event had been billed simply: a conversation about respect. No sponsors, no flashy graphics, no promises of political talking points. And yet the room was packed. Veterans, students, pastors, bus drivers, nurses, teenagers in hoodies, elders in Sunday hats. It wasn't the kind of crowd drawn to controversy. It was the kind drawn to truth. Backstage, Kennedy adjusted his tie. He wasn't nervous, he was ready. The viral moment had passed, the headlines had cooled. But the meaning? That still burned. This wasn't about setting the record straight. It was about setting something else, a new standard. As he stepped into the light, the audience rose, not out of obligation, but out of recognition. They weren't applauding a title. They were applauding what he represented: stillness in the storm, class in the face of contempt. He began without ceremony. "Most of y'all already know what happened. And if you don't, your phone probably does," he said, earning a ripple of knowing laughter. "But I didn't come here to rehash old jokes. I came here to ask a question. When did we start confusing cruelty with confidence?" He paced the stage slowly, eyes scanning the crowd. "I wasn't hurt that night. Not really. I've been called worse by better people," he said with a smirk. "But I watched a room full of powerful people laugh, not because something was funny, but because they didn't want to be the one who didn't laugh. That's what bothered me." He paused. "We live in a time where it's easier to join in than to speak up. But I want to remind y'all, there's strength in staying still." The crowd fell silent. No phones rang. No one whispered. Even the air felt like it was listening. Then he gestured toward a seat near the front. "Sarah's here tonight," he said, and the audience turned to see the young server, cheeks red, blinking fast. She didn't have a platform. She didn't have a microphone. But she had something more powerful: conviction. She saw something wrong, and she hit record. He continued, voice lower now. "And I've been thinking. Maybe this wasn't about me being mocked. Maybe it was about us, finally getting tired of watching grace get stomped on while arrogance takes the mic." A man in the back stood and shouted, "Say it again!" The room erupted in applause. Kennedy smiled, but there was sadness behind it. "I don't want to be viral. I want us to be better," he said. "Because next time it won't be me up there. It'll be someone with no title, no following, no defense. And if we've taught the world that it's okay to laugh, then look away, we'll all lose something we won't get back." Then came the final moment. Unexpected, quiet, but seismic. He reached into his coat and pulled out that same napkin from the flight attendant, the one that said, "Thank you for showing us what real strength looks like." He unfolded it slowly and held it up. "This napkin means more to me than any headline, because it came from someone who didn't have to say anything, but did." A pause. "That's what I want from you. Not applause, not a hashtag. I want you to say something when it matters. Speak up, or at least refuse to laugh." Then he turned to the cameras. "And if you've ever been mocked, overlooked, silenced because of how you speak, where you're from, or how you carry yourself, this moment is for you. You're not weak. You're just not loud. And that's not a flaw. That's a foundation." The crowd rose again, not just clapping, but cheering. Some were crying, others holding hands, and online, the live stream reached 500,000 viewers within the hour. As Kennedy stepped off the stage, someone handed him a phone. The top comment on the stream read, "I came for the viral guy. I stayed for the real leader." But perhaps the most powerful comment came moments later. "What if our whole culture shifted because one man refused to take the mic, and one girl pressed record?" Kennedy didn't smile. He nodded. Because that's what this was about now. Not the fall of a celebrity, not the rise of a public figure, but the quiet uprising of a forgotten virtue. And something told him. The real story was just beginning. A week later, the echo of that night still lingered, not just in news cycles or comment sections, but in hearts. Something had shifted. Not because a TV host had fallen, but because an idea had risen. Across the country, schools played Kennedy's speech in classrooms, churches quoted him from the pulpit, community leaders printed his words and taped them to office walls. You're not weak. You're just not loud. And that's not a flaw. That's a foundation. In places that rarely agreed on anything, barbershops, coffee shops, online forums, people were talking. Not about the insult, but about the response. And in that conversation, something rare bloomed: respect. Madison Lane, once a household name, now lived in digital exile. Her talk show was paused indefinitely, her book deal quietly canceled. She released an apology video, well-lit, polished, rehearsed. But it landed flat. Not because it wasn't sincere, but because it came too late. The public had already moved on, not to the next scandal, but to the next standard. For once, people weren't craving outrage. They were craving grace. Meanwhile, Sarah had become a quiet hero in her hometown. She didn't seek interviews, didn't try to monetize the moment. When asked why she filmed the incident, she simply said, "Because something in me knew it wasn't right to stay quiet." A local high school invited her to speak at a senior assembly. She nearly turned it down, too nervous. But in the end, she stood on stage, hands trembling, and told a room full of teenagers, "Sometimes courage isn't loud. Sometimes it's just not looking away." The auditorium went silent, then erupted. That speech, just 3 minutes long, was recorded by a teacher and went viral on its own. The girl who recorded Grace now teaches it. As for Kennedy, he returned to his usual rhythm: community meetings, hospital visits, Sunday church. But everywhere he went, people stopped him. Not for photos, but to say thank you. A young father whispered, "My son's been bullied at school for his stutter. We watched your video together. Now he says he wants to grow up and be quiet strong like you." A janitor slipped him a note that read, "I used to think being quiet meant I didn't matter. Now I know I've just been listening." One afternoon, Kennedy visited the same community center where the movement had taken root. There was no speech scheduled, no cameras, just a circle of folding chairs and people, ordinary folks, sharing stories. A retired teacher spoke about being mocked for her weight. A delivery driver talked about freezing up during a job interview. A teenager confessed he hadn't raised his hand in class for months because of his accent. Kennedy listened to each of them. No corrections, no slogans, just listening. When it was his turn to speak, he said this: "Y'all are the reason I stayed quiet that night. Not because I didn't have something to say, but because I knew the world didn't need more noise. It needed an example." He looked around the circle, eyes filled with something deeper than pride. Reverence. We're not going to change the whole world overnight, but we can change how we show up in it. That starts with respect, with noticing, with pressing record, not just on our phones but in our minds, remembering who we are when no one else is watching. That final gathering was never broadcast, but its message rippled, passed on in stories, in glances, in quiet moments between people who'd decided that kindness mattered more than claps. And in the end, that was the real legacy. Not the fall of a television star, not the viral fame of a silent man, but a cultural reset. A reminder that power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply refuses to stoop. So if you're reading this, if you've ever been silenced, overlooked, or told your calm wasn't enough, let this be your proof. Dignity doesn't need a microphone. And grace? Grace always leaves a trace. Because maybe the strongest voice in the room is the one that never had to raise itself to be heard.